Welcome, Ashley. I'm excited to chat with you a little bit on AI, or a lot of it, right? This kind of was
Right.
really off the cuff here. And, for what you were posting out on Twitter, you know,
Mhm.
it really resonated with me. Being an email automation guy, people are always asking for the shortcuts. How do I write content? How do I do the
Right.
automations? How do I do these things quickly? And, as for a writer like yourself, and
hmm
helping other freelancers do that, I'm sure that you get that kind of stuff all the time anyway. So I thought, hey, let's press record and have a conversation on this to see the pros, the cons, what you like, what you don't like about AI
Right.
in general, and maybe the
hmm
tools that are being released
Okay.
seemingly almost every day at this point. For context of this, you and I both tested the tools and things like that. And one of the things that caught my eye the most, or initially with what you said, was, hey, if you're using any of these AI tools to write blog content, you might want to think about it again. And so can you
Right.
kind of walk through what you found with
Yeah,
that?
so AI is an interesting subject for me because as an artist, as a writer, I don't like it at all. And I'll talk about some of those reasons in a minute. But as a marketer, I do think that there are some use cases for it where it makes sense to use. And I'll try to explain this hopefully in a way that makes sense. But AI essentially it takes basically everything I love about art and kind of turns it into math. And so it takes a lot of the human experience out of it. It takes the storytelling, it takes the creation. It essentially goes in and it scrapes what's already there and basically mimics what's already out there. And as an artist, I don't think that that makes sense if you're trying to bring unique ideas to into if you're trying to bring unique ideas to the table and introduce new things into a conversation. But again, there are certain things that I do as a marketer that are, I don't want to say they're math related, but they're very mundane tasks. So
Mm.
for example, if I'm like writing a definition, I'm not like writing a piece of poetry. It's not like this amazing thing. It's like this is what, digital marketing means or something. And so there's some, like, if you're trying to tell a story, which you should be if you're writing a blog post, if you're trying to bring a unique angle into something, then you're not going to want to turn to AI and say, hey, what is influencer mark, or like whatever, what are the new trends in influencer marketing or something. You're going to want to look into that as a human and bring in examples and things, and that's something that the AI can't do essentially. But if you're going to just write like a definition or something, then it'll work just fine for that. Maybe this get will, I don't know, get too deep or something. But I think my big issue with AI is that it takes really it allows us to mass produce content, and it allows us to mass produce bad content. And so that does a couple of makes a couple of things like problematic for me. First of all, is it cheapens content. It also makes it really difficult to find good content. It makes it difficult to know what like good content is. For me as a writer, like I mean, I've been studying writing and I've been reading avidly for my entire life essentially. But I like to think of it as it just like think of it in a way that's something that I don't understand. And for me, my husband, he's a musician, and like I'll be like jamming out to Taylor Swift or whatever, just like pop music that I love, and he'll listen to like jazz music, and like he's been studying music and he's a drummer and he gets it, and I'm just like I don't get this. And I think if there was like an AI tool out there that created music, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can finally make music or something. I
Mhm.
can finally like put my ideas into something and something will come out, as opposed to like nothing. And
Mhm.
so to me, I think that like an AI tool might, produce a song or something if it were created around music. And to him, he'd be like, no, this is garbage, like,
Mm.
and I think I've seen a lot of that happening like on Twitter or on blog posts. Like for me, I can identify immediately, like sometimes I work with subcontractors too, and I can identify like this is you put a question into AI and AI wrote this and it's not good. And so I think that like by having this tool that makes us be able to do something that we're not actually skilled at, it makes it just kind of fills the space with more noise, and it can bury some of the good content out there. I don't know that that will necessarily happen. I still think that, you know, people will be able to, I still think that that good content will be rewarded. I just think it'll just be more difficult to find, if that makes sense.
It's funny that you mentioned the music thing. I actually did find an AI music kind of thing.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and there's like a video
Interesting.
one, there's a whole bunch of other
Hmm.
things. So I went down this rabbit hole too. As a data guy
Hmm.
and a math guy, I'm always
Right.
looking for the repeatable, right?
Hmm.
And looking to see what works. It's only recently I started calling myself even a marketer, right? Like I always looked at
Uh-huh.
myself, I was a developer. Lines of code,
Right.
science, math, that's what I do. Doing what I do now as an email automation expert and a consultant in email marketing, I've
Mhm.
learned the skill of storytelling, writing.
Right.
Am I somebody
Hmm.
that's going to be, have a legacy on that stuff? Absolutely not. But I've definitely improved. If I look at what I wrote even 2 years ago, something like that, it's much better
Hmm.
today because of the practice, right? And, just being able to get
Right.
hands on the keyboard and the thoughts out on, paper, as it were, and then just
Hmm.
refining that and saying, oh, okay, if I just, learn some of the copywriting skills around writing, I could see improvements. As
Right.
a developer, I went down the rabbit hole of like, hey, this is, you know, it's a scary tool. AI is definitely a scary
Hmm.
thing, and I'm with you 110% on the C and D and F kind of writing that's this spits out that people then
Right.
put up on the web. The thing that I like it for as a tool is that, you know, if I'm stuck on something, like if I
Hmm.
want to write
Absolutely.
something and I know the topic, I know the point that I want to get, at least it kind of gets me going. It pushes the ball over
Hmm.
the hill, so to speak, for me anyway, right? And but by the
Right.
time I massage it between what was spit out, but to the time that it's either,
Hmm.
would I push send on that, it looks very different. As a
Right.
developer, and I remember this, I mean, I went to college in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. I went forward learning to be a programmer. And then the web came around and that became a thing, and I became a web developer and all of that. I
Hmm.
can't tell you how many times that I heard like, you're writing yourself right out of a job. Like you're writing code to do what
Right.
you do manually. At first, I never thought about it like that. But I was like, well, there's always somebody that's going to need to write the code. And that's who I
Right.
am. Right. And so
Uh-huh.
I kind of almost look at it like something that's, 25 years later, in the same way with
Hmm.
AI, is that AI is a tool. It's not the
Hmm.
thing, the
Exactly.
solution, but learning. And I've watched many videos and played around with it myself. What I put into AI is what I get out, which
Hmm.
is mostly garbage
Right.
because I don't ask it and form the prompts
Hmm.
properly, I guess. And what I see online from other people that they are much better at it. I'm like, man, those results are actually pretty good. Like that sentence
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense, or I wouldn't have worded it that way, or
Right.
whatever the case. And so, as a tool, I think it can be used nicely, but again, I'm
Hmm.
with you 100%. I think it's going to create a lot of noise, and it's going to be harder for the good stuff to kind of pierce through that noise. I'm
Hmm.
curious, like how, I mean, you ran tests too with like Google algorithm, like
Hmm.
the SEO algorithm and stuff like that. Can you kind of describe what you did and what you found out from those sort of tests?
Yeah. So essentially, you mentioned a couple things. So with the SEO test that I did, and this is, I mean, it wasn't extensive, but as far as like, I had an AI write, and this was actually before Chat GPT came out, and I think Chat GPT is significantly better at writing than some of the tools that I was using. Some of the other tools I think are better at like outlining and ideating and stuff like that. But I essentially I wrote a blog post, and it didn't get any traffic. So I don't know if that says something about, if I need to leave it up longer or something, but it just didn't get any response really. And I think that when I put I think that says a couple things. One, I think that there's some tools out there that can detect AI writing, and if a simple tool can detect it, then Google certainly can. And they've also come out and blatantly said, we're going to reward content that's written for humans as opposed and written by humans as opposed to being written for the algorithm and written to rank or like
Hmm.
to try and rank. And so I think that what Google does and what AI does, it's going to be really interesting in the next year because it's not super determined yet. I also think that the way that people write is going to change significantly, especially to stand out, because I mean really you can't get away with generic content anymore. And I think there's actually a lot of that right now. Like if you go to the first page of Google, and I like to use travel as an example, and I'm a huge traveler. But if you search anything travel related, what comes up is not the best travel content. It's not the best recommendations. It's the Lonely Planet. It's the Viator. It's the people who have the biggest marketing budgets,
Mm.
and they have the most money to put into content. And so right now it is being rewarded, I would say. But I think with Google's helpful content update, it'll be interesting to see. My prediction is that people will start writing a little bit more creatively. I know at least I plan to. I think that they're going to be bringing personal narrative into it more. I think they'll be bringing interview. We'll see a lot more subject matter expert interviews. We'll see a lot more original data. So things that haven't been published before, and that can be, some qualitative data that people have run internally or within their market. It could be, quantitative data that they just haven't published yet. I think that we'll see a lot. I actually think we're going to see a lot better content too because of IA. And yeah, so I'm interested to see kind of where that goes. But yeah, I think there'll be more content, but there'll be worse content, but there'll also be significantly better content from people who really care about creating content.
Google's algorithm is much smarter than all the free tools that can detect plagiarism and all that
Right.
stuff. And you
Hmm.
think that that's at least even in its current state is good enough to know like that's going to pierce all the noise that's being flooded in the market right now? Like, how do you
Yeah.
feel
I
like that?
mean, I don't. So I don't know. It's hard to say because I mean, even Google's algorithm it's also math. It's still has ranking factors and it's still looking for certain things. And people are smart and we always crack the code and we crack it quickly. To get things to rank. I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question. I wish I had a little bit more expertise to speak to that. I do think though that we will see more content on other platforms. Like I think newsletters will grow. So people who have I've manually subscribed into your newsletter because I want the content that you create because I know it's coming from you and from your experience and your style. I think it'd be cool if I don't know if we'll see this, but I kind of miss the like mom blog days where we had just these like little blogger blogs with just people in there and their experiences, and they were really creative and really fun. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see if there's any more platforms that pop up to kind of reward original content that isn't Google.
I went down this rabbit hole of AI and like, I think that people, I mean, I watched an interview with the founder of Stable Diffusion, which, is basically
Hmm.
OpenAI's competitor, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
And it was fascinating to me as a geek to hear him describe how the whole thing works and how it's built
Hmm.
and all of that. And what I find interesting is that they built it in a way, and OpenAI, after I saw this interview with the founder, I went down OpenAI's rabbit hole too, and they very much built
Hmm.
similar things. And not to get too into the weeds here, but what they really built was an actual AI. Like, as a geek,
Hmm.
I'm like, this isn't AI. I'm putting things in and it's not learning from me. It's just it all it does is learn the chat log, for lack of a better term. Like whatever I
Yeah.
typed in above it,
Hmm.
it kind of just goes and reads what happened above, but it takes its
Right.
own experience, if you will, and puts that out. It doesn't say like if I can, you know, chat GPT, it doesn't know who won the
Hmm.
World Cup. Like it doesn't know anything past a certain date. And
Right.
so it doesn't
Hmm.
actually actively learn. But what
Right.
I found super interesting was that the founder of Stable Diffusion, what he did was he built this tool in a way where it does actively engage the person who is using it. They basically got this grant and they put it into to teach Malawi kids literacy and numeracy. And basically for them to spend an hour a day with laptops, I think it was like 30,000 kids or something. It was kind of like a beta test kind of thing. And the kids, the AI itself learned from the kids interacting too. So it was
It's cool.
actually like a live engagement thing. And these kids were literally, they were learning things that they would have never learned
Hmm.
otherwise just from an hour a day
Right.
inside of
Mm-hmm.
13 months because this thing was engaging with it. So I found it super interesting because they will then, because of that, they now are, you know, that culture has now allowed them to kind of say, hey, you
Hmm.
could teach all of our kids, right? And so there's like
Right.
3.3 or 3.9 million kids that are now learning how to read, how to, use numbers and things of that nature,
Hmm.
just an hour a day because this AI tool is learning from the kids. It's a full cycle kind of deal.
Right.
And so I found it super interesting because I was like, okay, that to me makes a lot of sense. Like, that's a
Hmm.
tool that we're
Yep.
doing good with, right? And he even said,
Hmm.
he goes, in the wrong hands, this tool is not a good tool. But in
Right.
his mind, he thinks that, there's more good outcomes with this than bad outcomes. Remains to be seen.
Hmm.
But I think what we learn here as marketers is we're always trying to optimize for the thing. And then
Hmm.
we're using tools. We're like, great, we just saved 3 hours and $150 or whatever the case is. Let's just
Right.
put it up. It's good enough. Right. And so that's
Hmm.
where I was like, okay, well, I mean, I know what he's talking about for bad outcomes, but,
Right.
you know, for the context of this and who's watching here, that I feel like thinking about it from the perspective of different platforms, how can you use and optimize this for your business better, right? So instead of writing blog
Right.
posts or
Hmm.
things like that, I was
Yep.
like, oh, let me take a different angle and let me see how this works, Have you tried
Right.
any other aspects of your business with AI?
I agree completely with what you said. And I think that you make some important points. And first, I think to call it a tool, and also to really think about the purpose of what you're using the tool for. And this is, why at the beginning I said, as a creator and as an artist, I don't love it, but as a marketer, I find it really useful in a lot of ways. And I think that, I mean, one thing that's really cool about AI is that it has access to so much information, just things that I haven't considered, that I haven't learned, that I just don't know. And I'll give you a quick example. So my family, we have this business that we're starting. My mom, she's been a children's librarian for 25 years. She's like created this really cool product. And for me, I know some things about children literature, but what I bring to the table really is marketing and writing. And so I've been working on this blog post, and it's essentially just about book recommendations. And I haven't been able to get access to my mom because she's been doing busy, like, working on merchandising and sourcing different things. And so for me, I went to ChatGPT and was just like, okay, what are the 100 best children literature books or whatever? And so I was able to, it just returned it in like 5 seconds or whatever. And I was able to take, my experience, and then look at, what AI came up with, and I was able to kind of craft my own list. And so I think being able to access information that you might not have, and of course you always have to, like you mentioned earlier, like sometimes it's not going to be accurate, it's not going to be right, but having something there that you can reference as, a human who has, good deductive reasoning skills, you can ideate really, really quickly with it. And that's huge. I mean, a lot of the times it's, coming up with ideas. It's the dreaded blank page and blinking cursor. Like, if you aren't sure where to start, you can input some of these questions in it, and just like the children interacted and learned with, I mean, we can, oh, this is something that I didn't consider. This is something that perhaps that I could, pull into my marketing plan or into my ideas or something.
Mhm.
Another thing that it's really good at, and I was using that with, I don't think ChatGPT does this, but I was using writer.com or something. Anyway, but they're really good with outlining. So you can like put in a topic and it will come up with ideas to help you create essentially like a brief or an outline that's going to do well. And there are other tools that do this. I mean, we have a lot of, like, I mean, SEO tools that already do this kind of thing. And we have a lot of, there are some cool like editing tools that make writing a lot easier. I mean, Wordtune is a cool tool that you can go in and it'll rewrite your sentences and make sure that they like make sense grammatically. So there's definitely a place for AI, and there's definitely a place where you can use it to just like, you know, ideate, to outline, to quickly do some of those things that, if you need to generate an FAQ or something, like, use AI, it's fine.
Right.
But I would say if your purpose is to come in and to, create a blog, to rank, and to turn content into a commodity where you're making money, then AI is just going to, it's probably not the right purpose for that. And it's
Mhm.
probably won't rank in it. I don't know. I mean, maybe it will, but it's not going to bring a lot of value to people.
Yeah, I mean, I've used some tools too that are, like, I mean, I look at like Grammarly as sort of AI, right? Like I'm not, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
commas, all of that kind of stuff. Like, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
while there is an art, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
fixes some things, typos and all of that kind of stuff,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I found interesting once I kind of like changed my perspective as like, okay, well, writing content aside, well, how can I help? Like, how can I improve business processes and stuff? And what I found, what I thought was, hey, this is pretty cool. Probably if you're, like you said, if you're not trying to write blog posts to rank or
Mm-hmm.
things and contribute to the noise, let's say, you could
Right.
use it for other things. Like I thought was really interesting. I used Chat GPT for this as well, is that I was on a podcast and, as a
Mm-hmm.
podcast host myself, you always send out like these other materials after the podcast. Like, hey, you can send this out. Here's a few tweets. Here's a few social posts, and here's an email you can send out to your list. And it always seems very like generic. Like, here's the bullet points
Right.
and whatever, not
Mm-hmm.
tailored towards the person's audience, right? Like it's usually,
Yep.
very generic. And so I was like, I wonder if I could take this, dump this into Chat GPT and say, rewrite this as if it's coming
Mm-hmm.
from an email marketing expert to an audience of course creators. And it came out with something that
Right.
was really pretty good. Like it just wasn't like, hey, go listen
Mm-hmm.
to this podcast. Here's the 17 bullet list. And I was
Right.
like, okay, that I could work with. Now I just saved a
Yeah.
whole bunch of time to be able to then just kind of tailor that email that's going to go out. I thought was like this
Yep.
instead of writing that generic as the host now, and this is how
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it from the perspective of podcast hosting, online summits, talks, affiliate marketing materials,
Mm-hmm.
all of these other kind of things to hopefully be able to create those supportive materials more personal, more useful to the
Right.
people that are going to use those. And,
Mm-hmm.
I thought it, like I've already started geeking out with it because I guess ChatGPT now has a Zapier integration. And I'm like, oh, I could
Oh,
probably
wow.
like start to be able to like put a form up.
Oh,
Hey,
that makes sense. Yeah.
what's your stuff? And then spit this back
Mm-hmm.
out. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just interesting to like, okay, now it's a tool that make it levels me up as somebody that is trying to help, you know, other people be more successful with the things that I'm trying to help them with. And I
Right.
just thought it was very interesting because it was like, now I start to see, because I was very much like, hey, this is a tool, like kids are going to write their term papers on it and things like that. And like, I started
Yeah.
really like getting
Which
down
they will.
about it. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And
I would have.
Right, yeah. And so now I'm like, okay, there's an actual use case for this where it's like, okay, how can we use it to help, like as you said, the spark the blank page or whatever it is that we're
Hmm.
trying to solve for. I would love
Right.
to hear your thoughts on like how do you think that AI could improve so that we can use it
Hmm.
better?
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as like repurposing content goes, like I love that you brought that up because that is a really good use case for AI. And I mean, repurposing content, it's like it can take a lot of your time, and it is something where you've already presented your ideas. One thing that I think that I would like to see, I guess, is I don't know that like I think that you can have it right for a certain audience, but I think that it could be better at that, at writing for a particular audience, like really bringing in, audience research, and there's a lot of data out there that audience research data that maybe they could pull from. I don't know how any of this works. I'm not a programmer, but I think that one thing that I don't love it about AI right now is that I think that sometimes because it's not writing for a particular audience, and maybe this has to do with how people are inputting it into ChatGPT or what they're using, but sometimes when you're not writing for a specific audience, you're not writing for anybody, and it
Mm,
makes it really difficult to connect with it because yeah, just because it's like you're not nailing the tone, or you don't understand what they're looking for. You don't like just a lot of these audience research things that you would know by talking to your audience. I don't think AI does a great job of that yet. And so for me, I think if they could pull some of that data into it, like and find a way to just really like tweak for tone, it would be really cool and really
mhm.
interesting. I definitely think that the AI has a place in business, and I mean, admittedly, I don't use it for writing so much as I use it for other tasks in my business.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Like I don't necessarily, I actually find it more cumbersome and take my writing longer, right?
Yeah.
Like I do
Mhm.
like the idea of like ideation or outlining or even just reword, this kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, that's kind of where I've found its sweet spot, at least for me right now. But it's sort of opened
Mhm.
up the idea, like I was saying, it's like, oh, okay, well, I could probably use it for other things, especially in like automation and, in my
Yeah.
world, as far as email and segmentation and personalization goes, I would love to see
Mhm.
AI be more like, I guess, adaptable, for lack of a better term. Like you were
Okay.
saying, like learn,
Yeah.
hey, who did win the World Cup? Who, like how do we incorporate
Mhm.
these things in a way where, you know, if my business is email marketing, automation, and course creators are the kind of people that I work with and creators in general. Like, how do I make my own AI? Like, how do I have something that kind of learns about me, my everyday, and who I work with and stuff like that so that I can actually have
Mhm.
something other than just whatever I said recently, And I
Mhm.
would love to see something like that. I don't know if that's coming down the road, but at least it gives me hope that maybe this is something that is a I don't know, critical point in history on the line or something like that. Like
Right.
at least looking
Mhm.
at that interview, which I really did happen to stumble upon. Like I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And
Mhm.
about an hour and a half later, I was like, oh, so this is really what it's for. So hearing
Mhm.
him and how he described it sounded like his vision was to have like these kind of models where, there
Mhm.
was a sound model, like you said, or, music model, there's a voice model, there's a writing model, and like where you could kind of
Mhm.
like almost how I envisioned was like fold it back. And now you have this new thing, right? Like it's learned these new things. And now there's this thing now that exists. Scary knowing like sci-fi movies and stuff like that, like robots
I
taking over the world. But it
know. Right.
it seems pretty cool, at least from a perspective of that, like to be able to maybe, hey, that now there's an Ashley AI model that you can train it, right? Things like that. So
Right. Yeah. I just think that it'll also be interesting. I mean, as cool as as AI, keeps getting I think that it will help us, automate the mundane things, but I think it'll be interesting to see, like, as intelligent beings, as humans, like how we react to it and what that does in terms of creation and in terms of art. Like, I think that I don't think that AI is ever going to overtake us in terms of creativity, because it can't. I mean, it doesn't have stories to tell.
Mhm.
But one thing that I think that will be cool is just how we respond to it and how that changes the way we create art or something, and then how it helps us, speed up those mundane tasks, and also how it can help us learn. Like, I mean, if I could learn, music from an AI tool, I would in a second, because I don't know anything about it. And of it being able to help people with literacy, or and I mean, if you can't put a sentence together and you want to, and you go to
Mhm.
AI and you start learning that way, that's actually really neat. It's giving you something that's motivating and that's interesting and that is going to help you develop a skill. So I think that's pretty cool too.
People always say like, "Hey, this is a pivotal point in history." I don't know that this is, but I feel like there's, you know, I feel like, at least from my perspective, that there is something here that could take it to that next level. Like there's, like the internet became a thing. My grandmother was like, "All right,
Hmm.
what's this thing?" Like, where's the
Right.
phone? But I don't know it's
Hmm.
that pivotal, but I think it's definitely something where it could actually be beneficial to us as humans, as long as, you know, like
Right.
what we talked about here. I think that, using it as a tool, learning how we can better use it for business or humans, like
Hmm.
us as
Right.
humans, as a society kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I think that that kind of, I don't know. For me, it's like a hopeful kind of thing, right? Like, as two, I have
Right.
two young boys, so it's like, I'm like, okay, I just want to leave the place better, and
Right.
I
Right.
hope it is better for them. So yeah, I love this conversation.
Me too.
Before I let you go here, where can people go and find more about you?
I'm basically across all of social media, as my handle is at Ashley R. Cummings. And so you can find me on Twitter, Ashley R. Cummings, on LinkedIn, my website, ashleyRcummings.com. And yeah, that's, if you go to my Twitter, you can also sign up, or my website, you can also sign up for my newsletter. I send out a weekly newsletter called Content Connect, and it's essentially about writing and content marketing trends and just tips to, help you grow. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate this conversation. Hopefully we can like maybe revisit this in like a year and be like, hey, Ashley and
That's
Jason
what
were
I was
completely
thinking,
wrong,
actually. I was like,
So
yeah, I was like, this would be interesting as a year, and see what what we got right and what we got wrong.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Ashley.